Hey guys, I realized something kind of interesting this week that I thought maybe would be interesting to you too. So I was just gonna share it really quick. But um, I've really been thinking about like how, because I have a small window of tolerance, and it's gotten worse over time, not better, because I haven't had the tools and I haven't known how to fix it. So like my ability to tolerate like really painful sensations inside or really painful experiences, I'm losing that tolerance. I'm losing the ability to sit in that stuff. And it's really starting to affect me in really kind of concerning ways. So I finally have found resources to start working on that, one of those being somatic therapy, because a lot of this small window of tolerance has caused me to have to avoid a lot of stuff because I don't know how to tolerate it if it doesn't go well. It's almost like, okay, I can't go over there and start working on building a house because I literally don't have any tools to build a house. So how could I go over there and build a house? Or maybe that's not the best analogy. You can't go in the river because you don't know how to swim. Like you could drown, you could die. And while you might not actually drown or die from feelings and sensations, it feels that way sometimes. Because it can be such intense stuff that's getting triggered in the body, let alone the mind. So anyway, as I started really looking at this avoidance problem that I have, it's made me realize how much that in turn obviously shows up in relationships and how I make relationships. And what's really fascinating is I was thinking this week about how it makes me show up in a fantasy version of myself, a more self-limiting version of myself, to try to control my environment and make sure that like really distressing things don't happen as much as possible. Because again, I can't get in the river. I don't know how to swim. So I try to make sure that I'm staying on land, staying in positive interactions as much as possible so that I don't feel like I'm drowning. But the really fascinating thing that I realized this week is that, like, okay, I try to control my environment by only showing the best, most positive versions of my personality to try to make sure things stay positive. But I also, in turn, am trying to control others when I do this, because I also only show a limited amount of my personality so that I only experience a limited amount of your personality as well. I had realized how much I was controlling and modifying myself, but I hadn't really pieced together how much I also do that in an attempt to control other people and almost keep them self-limited. They're not self-limiting. I'm trying to almost perform this sort of magic trick where by staying really pleasant, it keeps you really pleasant. And as long as both of us are really pleasant and happy, distressing things hopefully aren't going to happen. So what I've done, what my brain has figured out how to do, is almost create this like unrealistic version of life and relationships that obviously is more shallow and lacks roots, but also is not allowing not only myself to be who I am, but I'm not allowing other people to fully be who they are either, because I don't know what to do with the whole picture, the full picture. Also, for me, this feels different than fawning. I feel like with fawning, it's, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's like anticipatory fawning. I have no idea. But this feels different than fawning because like nothing bad has happened. And this is happening with people who I feel decently safe with. So it's not that I don't feel safe with them in the sense that I sense that they have like anger issues, or, you know, there's some kind of like potential threat that I've sensed in them that's very serious, or some kind of like harm that may come. It's not that. It's that I have a low threshold for any amount of conflict, or honestly like the sides of people that make me uncomfortable that I don't know what to do with. I don't want to take on the risk. I guess I'd put it like that. I don't want to take on the risk of like getting to know you better and then seeing something that I don't know how to deal with. that's the selfishness of it, is my brain has just decided there's only a certain amount of reality that I want to encounter. And so because of that, I will perform all these little like magic tricks with myself to try to keep reality in that state. I think that's maybe a better way of trying to explain that, because I'm not talking about fawning. And it's just kind of fascinating because I just had never pieced those two things together before, how the sort of magic trick that I'm doing with myself, which that in and of itself was really tricky to figure out and catch on to. I mean, it's really hard to kind of like figure yourself out when you're with yourself every day and you're kind of like desensitized to your own habits and thoughts because of that. So even realizing like, oh wow, I'm essentially trying to like control my environment by limiting myself, that was a huge realization for me. But then to realize like how I'm also attempting to control others and piecing those two things together was also huge for me as well. I don't know if I explained that well enough, but it's just funny because when I think about how people might want a fantasy version of someone or get mad at someone for not being a fantasy version of themselves, I feel like I typically think about like romantic stuff or like codependency, but here's this really just very subtle but honestly kind of like funny way that the brain wants a less realistic version of people that I don't know, I just wouldn't have necessarily considered before. I feel like there's just so many different ways someone can go out in the world and almost look at people and go, I want this part of you, but not that part of you, and almost try to like disassemble people and only keep the parts of them that we want. Not everybody does that, but I just continue to be surprised by all the different ways that the brain can kind of sneak up and try to do that when we're uncomfortable or we don't necessarily know how to deal with more realistic versions of people or life. I just feel like that's a lot of times where this starts to show up. Another way or another aspect of that I was thinking about where I try to limit myself to keep others limited is even like when I tell jokes, not all the time, but sometimes like when I'm telling a joke to keep you where my distress tolerance like needs you to be. I'm trying to keep you in a mood that my distress tolerance needs you to be in, so that I can keep experiencing a side of you that my distress tolerance needs to feel safe. Again, this isn't all the time, but I can totally see how this is a thing sometimes with newer people, or where there's perhaps the potential for something uncomfortable to happen and I just like don't want it to happen. I know I'm explaining maybe a really basic phenomenon in a more complex way, but it's just a slightly different way of thinking about it that I hadn't considered. It's just another way of trying to control my reality that's very subtle, but again, keeps me limited and keeps others around me limited as well. And I think that's the part of it that really matters, and I'm trying to kind of hone in on. I think, again, the biggest healing comes from looking at like the parts of our environment that we can change, and most of that comes down to us. Well, really all of that comes down to us. I mean, you can try and force people to change and sometimes you're successful, but that doesn't usually go well long term. But yeah, I don't know, just look as I continue to try to see like, how am I shaping my environment around me, and why am I shaping my environment in this way? And what can I do to improve that? Because I, like anyone else, I want to experience the fullness of people, the whole part, like the whole picture of who people are. And yet I fear it at the same time. And I was watching a video the other day that talked about how like the fearful-avoidant, the sort of disorganized fearful-avoidant attachment style is like most strongly linked to anyone who's been a scapegoat, which was really interesting, but it made sense when the person explained it the way that they did, where it's like you saw essentially like a type of malice and harshness to human beings that make you not trust them. But then because you were told that you're dirty and wrong and dysfunctional, almost like in your core, you also don't trust yourself. And that literally what the fearful avoidant attachment style is I can't trust others, but I also can't trust myself. So like there's no one to trust. And you have this sort of like dichotomous desire to attach to others and experience love, and yet run away at the same exact time. And it's terrible. But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that. I thought you guys might find that interesting. So much of life is just not a fantasy, and I realize it time and time again as throughout the years, like how much I have tried to turn life into a fantasy, or I've tried to turn others into something that they're not because of my own like hopes and dreams and just lots of things. And I just think this is another way that I can work on improving, one step at a time, with grace and compassion for myself. But on the off chance that this helps anyone else, I hope that it does.